before I kill kids. Welcome to Paranormal the New Normal. Back again for yet another session of trying to make this world seem a little more normal, which, as I say every time, is a little impossible. But I try. I try. I'm your host, as always, Jeremy. And I am joined today by an author and a fellow podcaster. And I love talking to fellow podcasters, so this is going to be a fun one. My guest today is George Lunsford, and he is the author of Legends, Myths, Monsters, and Ghosts, the USA edition, which is going to be his newest book, and it's coming out in November, which I'm definitely going to get a copy because it sounds interesting as could be. But we'll get to that in a second. George, how you doing tonight?
Doing good. How are you?
Can't complain. I officially got put into my management role in my job after 6 weeks of training, so I can't complain.
Yeah, that's great.
So it's been a good day, so I can't complain at all. Besides my kids drive me crazy, but my listeners know that's a normal thing.
Oh, that's their
So
job. It really
it
is.
it is their job. It really is to drive their parents crazy. But and I hope they heard that. But so first question I always ask everybody on this show: what got you into the paranormal?
Well, I guess it started back when my great grandmother passed away, and I was asleep in my room, and she appeared to me that night that she passed away. She actually were. I woke up and she was sitting on the end of my bed, and she just said, "Come by to tell me bye" before she left.
Well, I mean that's actually a common story I hear from a lot of people is that it's a loved one that tries to communicate with them after passing, and that's how they get into it because they know there's something more out there than what we can see and what we know about, what most people believe in. So, which
Oh yeah,
these days it's people believe in more and more these days, of course, than they did back then. But of course,
true. Well, plus the fact that I died one time for a short period of time, and I've seen what's on the other side, so I know what's there.
interesting, and we will definitely get into. Well, actually, let's start off with that because I like to go into experiences first. So let's let's start with that. I mean,
Sure.
I love when my guests start me right off my idea of how the show's gonna go. It makes it a good show. That makes it a better show when that happens. So, so
I'm bad at that. I apologize.
no apology needed. I love a good NDE story. So let's hear it. I'm dying to hear it. Pardon the pun.
I was in my 20s and I got pneumonia. Went to the doctor, and I went to a doctor who obviously didn't know what they were talking about. They said, "Hey, yeah, you're sick, but you're not. You don't have pneumonia." 3 days later, I was running a fever over 104 and was lethargic. Couldn't even sit up in a chair. Couldn't do anything. They actually carried me, and I'm a pretty good sized boy. So my father come over and they picked me up and carried me out, put me in a car, took me to the hospital. Hospital went crazy. Threw me on the gurney, run me in emergency, started pumping all this stuff into me, and half my lungs were filled with fluid. And that night, I was in the room up in the hospital, and for some reason, I woke up and I was sitting there going, "Why am I here?" And all of a sudden, I started just feeling antsy. So I sat up in the bed and I looked over, and my body was still in the bed, but I was sitting up. And this little woman was in there. She's an older woman. And she goes, "It's okay. It's all right. Don't, it's nothing bad. It's okay." And these, all of a sudden, I stood up beside the bed, and these people's heads and bodies started coming through the walls of my room. And all these different people had come into the room. And over in the corner was a figure. I couldn't really see that well, but it had shape of wings and everything. It was I can only guess it was an angel because that's what it looked like. That's what guessed what it was. And I was talking to all these people in my room, and I was talking to the little old lady that was in my room, and my body was laying on the bed, and I was up walking around talking to people. Well, that figure raised his hand up in the air, and this little white dot formed, and it started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And next thing you know, it's bigger than the doorway. And these people start telling me bye, and they're walking out into that light and up this like almost like a tunnel type thing. And everybody was going except me and the little lady and the angel. Well, I started towards it, and she goes, "No, no, 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 no. You don't need to go anywhere. It's not your time yet." And I looked at her kind of funny. She said, "No, no, it's not your time. Lay back down. Everything's going to be fine." And the clock has not moved. The time never changed on the clock. No second hand never moved or nothing. So I walked back over to the bed and I sat down. And as I lay back down, I look at her and she waves by and she smiles at me, walks into that light, and that figure put his arm down and the light disappeared and he disappeared. And then next thing I know, these alarm bells are going off and people are bursting into my room. And they're all, I mean, these people are going all frantic and everything, all the nurses and stuff. And I looked at them, I said, "What are you doing?" And they all just stopped dead and looked at me. And I said, "Who is so and so?" And I mentioned the lady's name, and everybody left except for one nurse. And she was pale. She wasn't green when I said that. And she goes, "She died in this room right before you got here."
Ooh, that
And proved to them that it all happened. I named every person that died in that hospital that week.
nice. I like a story like that with actual proof where you actually know that you experienced something rather than just a vivid dream. So I mean that's creepy, but that's also so cool. Like I mean, I don't want to have that a near death experience, but if I did, if I did, that's how I'd want it to happen. I'm just saying. But
It was awesome. Like I tell you, there was never been in my life that feeling of calmness and just nothing. It was just a real relaxing, calm feeling. I wasn't mad. I wasn't excited. I wasn't scared. Nothing.
well, I mean, for all the stories I've heard about people meeting a divine presence or God, whatever you want to call it, I mean, they always say it's calming. It's calming and it's peaceful, and you never felt that way before in your life until that moment. So, I mean, it makes sense. It really does. And was not expecting to get an NDE story on this. So, wow, what a bonus! I will say. So,
I like to satisfy. I like to help out. It's just what I do.
I appreciate it because wow. So, your book that's coming. You, now, is this book that's coming out your first book or no?
Actually, it's my fifth book. My first four was I did Legends, Myths, Monsters, and Ghosts. I did the Southern edition, the Northern edition, and all that. Well, I put them all together in this book, and I added 100 more stories, and I added two more of the Indian tribes. Added the Hopi and the Chickasaw.
Mm,
And the Hopi, their stories are long, but they're good. They're really good to read.
I mean, the Native American legends are always great. Whether you're reading them or hearing them verbally, they're always amazing stories, and that's one. That's why I use actually for when I have to defend the paranormal to people. I go back to Native Americans 90% of the time because they have stories for pretty much everything we believe in nowadays. So
Oh
I
yeah,
and I say if it was around back then, then it's probably still around now. I doubt it disappeared, but
yep, you're right. And the thing is that their stories, I mean, everybody else's stories have lots of variations. People change it when they tell it. But
yeah.
when the North American Indians tell stories, their stories stay the same from the first time they was told till now. It always stays the exact same. They have a better oral history than we do.
Well, of course. I mean, they've been around. They've been around for thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of years, possibly. I mean, I forget the exact I forget how long ago it was that supposedly that people crossed over the land bridge up there in Alaska into America. I forget how long that was, but it was a long time ago. That's as much as I remember from history class. But
Well, you read their histories and the different stories from the different tribes, you'll see when they come across that bridge, they was somebody already here. They run
I
into what they called the white giants, and they were out west and they were over on this side of the Mississippi, and
yeah,
they had
which
issues
that's
with them.
oh, of course, that's human nature. But
The fact the giants were cannibals.
well,
You gotta eat, yeah.
that would go along with all the fairy tales and whatnot. But so makes sense to me, 100%. But
Yeah, yep.
I
Well,
mean,
that
and also, I mean, the giants. I mean, I like to listen to a podcast called Monsteropolis, done by Small Town Monsters,
yeah,
and Heather Mosier, one of their newer co-hosts. She has her own podcast called The Lore You Know, and she did a whole segment on giants in America and around the world, and she knows a
cool.
lot of history on that and a lot of proof that's been found and whatnot. So, I mean, I definitely believe that giants existed at one point. If they still don't, I think they still may somewhere, but we just don't know where.
If you look at the definition of a giant, it's anybody over 7 foot. So the NBA is mostly giants.
Well, I mean, between that and Space Jam, they're either aliens or giants, so I believe it. But so I mean, giants definitely existed, and I believe it. And I mean, maybe there were two offshoots. Maybe there was a giant, and maybe there was Bigfoot, and they just one was hairier than the other. I mean, that's the way I look at it.
Well, my theory is what I wrote in my book too, is that Bigfoot was a descendant of the giants because the Indians run them basically into the caves and to get away, they had to get away from before they all got wiped out. So I think they went into the Mammoth Cave system and other cave systems.
Yeah, I'm a well. So I well, okay. Well, first, part A, were are, I mean, are you kind of relating it to the whole Gigantopithecus type of Bigfoot origin story that people have been saying for a long time now? Like, is it close to that, or were
No,
they?
I'm thinking that the giants themselves, they were pretty primitive anyway, and they just basically didn't evolve. They evolved to their surroundings like every creature does. So being in the caves and everything else, they would grow the hair since they didn't have the clothes, and they would be out hunting deer and stuff like Bigfoot does. And it only makes sense to me that because they can't grow as tall as what the regular giants were, they're not getting any bigger than 9, 10, 12 foot tall.
Yeah, which make makes sense to me as well. And so yeah, I mean that kind of is similar to Gigantopithecus in a way, because I mean that whole origin basis is just that Gigantopithecus, and let's see how many times I can say without messing it up. But that they were a species around the same time as Homo sapiens, and they believe the Homo sapiens killed them all off, but that's been in theory for years that that's where Bigfoot came from, is that they were the Gigantopithecus and they just learned to hide from humans better because they were killing them.
Well, the
So
only thing about that theory that I makes me disagree with it is the feet. The feet are totally different on Gigantopithecus than what it is on a human.
so I have been saying it wrong the whole time. Damn it.
Close enough. I
I
don't know if I said it right or not. So
yeah. I think you're right because it's that P sound in the middle instead of the T sound. But basically, I mean, I actually have never looked that close into the feet of it. So, I mean, I could believe that. I could believe that because I never actually even thought of looking into that like difference. And were they smaller than what we believe Bigfoot's feet size to be nowadays, or
I haven't really looked into it a lot. I just kind of glanced at it here and there.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I could believe that. That's highly possible. And I mean, who knows where Bigfoot came from? There's so many different theories on where they could have came from. And I mean, yeah, it would make sense that they were related to giants originally, because I mean, they could just be smaller, hairier versions of giants.
Well,
And
the thing about their foot, the way it has the break in the middle of the foot, that makes me think they adapted that from being inside the caves and walking on the rocks and stuff. Their feet would adapt to that or evolve to that situation.
Which I can believe because that was actually part B I was gonna bring up is I talk about on this show I talk about on this show all the time about the hollow earth and the cave systems in the world. And I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
I don't know whether I believe in hollow earth 100% or not. I mean, it would explain a lot to me, but until someone gets evidence of it, I mean, I can't really just say it's gotta be true. I mean,
right. I just
it
think
sounds a
it's
lot
big.
more believable than flat earth.
Yeah, that's true. I had a flat Earth. I
I
don't.
can't I can't agree I can't believe in that. It's just impossible.
No, I've been out in the ocean way too far in the ocean to believe in flat Earth. Just
Same. I
because
mean, I've been on
horizon
cruise ships.
and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on cruise ships where you can't see anything but water, and there's no way it's flat. I mean, it's just no, and it wouldn't make sense. But
No,
I mean, the cave systems in America, I use that all the time. I talk about how it's probably related to the missing 411 cases, how it's probably where it would explain where Bigfoot and Dogmen and all these cryptids can hide and
yeah.
not be seen, and it would make sense.
Well, if you think about like Western North Carolina, I live in Western North Carolina, and just this small area, of Western Carolina, we have over 1 million acres that are wooded. It is just wood. So, I mean, it's not hard for me to believe that they hide in the woods. But when you figure just the Pisgah Forest, the uh, what is it? Nantahala Forest is over 1 million acres.
Yeah. Yeah, I live in Massachusetts, and I've been down in North Carolina, so yeah, there's a lot of big forests out there, and I could believe that 100%. And, I mean, yes, they can hide in the forest, but in certain parts of the country, they have to have some other like, in the desert, like, they have to have somewhere else to hide. 'Cause
Yeah,
I mean, over in the desert in the West, they call them I forget what they call them, it's sand something, but they don't call them Bigfoot, they call them I forget what they call them, sand something, I think it is. I've heard other
yeah.
podcasts talk about it, but yeah, there's so many names for Bigfoot around the world that you can get lost trying to think of them all. But so yeah, I mean the case system idea I always liked. I always liked that that's explains a lot. Explains why all these hunters and whatnot go missing and it's all right on that cave system line too where they go missing, which is the eerie part.
Yeah. I'm gonna be moving around for a second, but
Yeah, it's all good.
that's a
So are there any stories of my favorite cryptid that I already mentioned? Is there any Dogman stories in your book?
yeah, I've got Dogman stories like the Beast of Bray Road and stuff's in there. Amanda's outside. Go up there. Amanda? Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Unexpected.
That's okay.
Yeah, the
But I mean,
Beast of Bray Road. I've been up there, and we actually went out. We went down Bray Road from the beginning to the end of it to check things out. And there's areas up there I can easily believe Dogman's up there because just you've got farmland, and then patches of woods here and there.
yeah, I mean, and I'm actually having in about a month, I'm gonna have one of the directors of the North American Dogman Project site on my
Oh,
show,
cool. Good
which
sight.
yeah, I've been referring to that site since I started this podcast because there's that map they have of encounters is eerie as hell if you look at it, and
Oh yeah.
even if 80% of those are still like made up stories or false, that's still a lot of dots on that map, and it's
Yeah, it
creepy.
is. We actually had one here, a report, a written, solid report, not far from where I live at, over a place called Lake Powhatan. They found a print like this big of what they think is a dogman. It was huge.
I mean, from what I understand, dogmen are basically worldwide. I mean, I've heard stories of them in Asia, Europe, and I mean, well, they started in Europe for, I mean, and now they started everywhere, but they started in Europe a lot, especially in the European paranormal folklore they have. I mean, the Beast of Gadavon, or however you say that. But I mean,
Yeah,
I believe that was a dog man. I think they just change the story up at the end to not scare people. But I definitely was a Dogman, I think.
And over towards Germany or Austria.
Yeah. Yeah, that it was a German, the beast of government. Actually, no, it was French, I think.
Was it
Is
French?
that? Oh, I mean, just the name, like Jadavon, like that's like a French name. I would think. Like I never can pronounce that right. Never can. It's just one of those words. I'll hear it one day, and the next minute I try to say it. It's just like nope.
My book next year, it's called Monsters of the World. Uh, there is I think there's a Dogman story in it, actually, too. I actually have an encounter I put in. A guy sent me an encounter that he had with a Dogman over there.
Where was it? You cut out when you said the name of the place.
Do what?
When you said the location, you cut out. What was the location?
It was somewhere over in the UK.
Oh, UK. Okay, I didn't hear the UK part.
I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
probably left it out.
Yeah. I mean, there have been stories of dogmen in the UK in the British Isles for a long time, and it's just, I mean, dogs can swim, so
That's
it's,
true.
it's
But Oh Shuck is the one there too. It's not a dog man, but it is a paranormal cryptid dog. It's big, huge, black wolf-like with the red eyes.
yeah. I had a paranormal investigator from the UK on my show a while back, and he was investigating like a church that near him in the UK where supposedly one of those ran up to the door and like was trying to get in the church, but it couldn't. But its paw prints are still on the door to this day. It says these
Oh,
black
wow.
marks of him trying to scratch his way in the door, and they say it's the mark of like evil, basically. But
From what I've heard about those and what I've read about them, whew, I believe it. They're like a hellhound almost. It's like one notch up from being a hellhound.
yeah, which I mean, hellhounds are a whole nother interesting thing. I mean, dog cryptids altogether are just fascinating because I mean, I have a mastiff, a 9-month mastiff in my house, and if that thing got up on 2 legs, I might faint out of fear because it would be scary. It would be, it'd be very scary because when she jumps up to hug me at this point, even, and she's still a puppy, but she's so big that when she jumps up to hug me, it's like, whoa, like she literally can lick my face when she jumps up already. So it's just
I love
scary.
them. I think they're so cool. Those are awesome dogs.
Yeah, we're actually planning on we're getting a replacement male because the male our 18-week-old male one died. We had to put it down because it was born with misshaped kidneys.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it was last week. It wasn't fun, but the breeder is giving us a new male puppy, so we do plan on breeding. We do plan on breeding them and having puppies eventually to just because why not? But
That's
yeah, I'm looking forward to it somewhat. My wife is looking forward to it a lot more than I am, but it's her project, so as long as she handles it, I don't care.
we all got to have a project, so that's all good.
Oh, we do, and I don't want her complaining about me podcasting, so I go along with what she wants to do usually. So
That worked.
it works sometimes. But and yeah, I mean, I actually had another guest on my show a while back, and he was in the army and he was in Egypt with his troop, and one of his buddy one of his buddies in the troop was from New Orleans, and he saw a statue of Anubis, and he freaked out. And he's like, "What is that?" And they're like, "It's an ancient Egyptian god. Why?" He's like, "I've seen that twice in my backyard when I was a kid."
Roogaloo.
The Rougarou, yep. Like, and I said that I'm like, "Oh, that's the Rougarou," and he's like, and I'm like, "Yeah, that's the Dogman in the New Orleans. Basically, they believe it's a African Haitian thing. Like they the Rougarou."
Yep.
And
I
it's a
lost
Creole thing now.
the
But I guess once he saw it in his backyard when he was looking out his window at night, and then another time he was down by a river and he saw it like with his front paws up on a log, like kind of just going down the river.
I can believe that.
And like it just, I guess it turned its head and looked at him and then just kept going. Like it didn't stop or try to go after him or anything. It just kept going. And from what I heard, dogmen are not extremely dangerous, but they do like to like bluff you and like false charge at you just to scare you off because they're dogs, so it's territorial. I mean, but it's just Still wouldn't wanna run into one. Still wouldn't want to run into one, because that would just creep me the hell out.
I still wanna find Bigfoot. I'm gonna go look for him this fall. I'm gonna keep on till I find him. I've seen UFOs, I've seen ghosts, but I haven't seen a cryptid yet.
Same. I've seen the same 2 things, but I also don't go out because I hate nature. I hate outdoors. I I mean, I get made to go on hikes all the time by my wife with the kids, but I hate nature. I hate outdoors. I hate hiking. I hate it, but I'm forced to go. And I mean, I'm always looking. The whole time I'm in the woods always, I'm always, like, looking both ways, like, just constantly keeping an eye out for something because 'cause I'm like, "Please make it worth my while. Let me see something." But and Bigfoot actually is there's this forest about 10, 15 minutes from where I live called Leominster State Forest,
Mhm.
and there's known Bigfoot sightings there in Massachusetts. And Bigfoot actually, they I saw a picture online a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, near Braintree, Massachusetts, which is by Boston.
Yeah.
They in the woods, someone took a picture of something they thought was like a structure built by a Bigfoot. It was a
Oh, cool.
bunch of it was a bunch of big tree limbs and whatnot, like a teepee form almost. And like the way it was made, they're like no human would take the time in this part of the state to just build this in the woods. Like even a homeless person wouldn't go through that much work just to build that in the woods. So it's just it was I saw that I was like, huh, I wonder. But Massachusetts is home to a lot of creepy things. I mean, Bridgewater Triangle alone is like every cryptid known to man,
Oh,
supposedly.
yeah.
So which is where my wife lived. My wife, before she moved in with me, lived on the perimeter of the Bridgewater Triangle.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, I mean, she supposedly has she thinks she's been abducted by aliens in that house. That house was built on a Native American burial ground, supposedly.
Mhm.
So it's a very creepy house to be in at night. And we've been up till 3, 4, 5 in the morning there. And you walk through if you're not, even if you're in one room, you get creepy feelings and like your body will just turn cold. Like it's
Oh, wow.
I mean, she's seen shadow people and a bunch of other stuff I talked about in the show before, and she actually saw a giant snake when she was a kid, like they talk about for the Bridgewater Triangle, like just huge black snakes that shouldn't live like that far north.
Yeah,
But
I've heard that.
so I mean, it's definitely a creepy place, and that's where my UFO sighting took place.
Oh,
Was
really?
on her back porch. Yeah, we were. Well, I'll tell this fast because I've said it before a lot in this podcast, but we were walking we were walking in the backyard one into the backyard one night and going inside, and we're up in the porch about to go in the door, and all of a sudden my, son's like, "Dad, why are those stars moving?" I'm like, "What are you talking about, stars moving?" I look up, I'm like, "Ew," and it's just 8 or 10 star-looking items, but they're all moving in one direction at the same time, at the same speed.
Oh, cool.
And I mean, stars don't move to the naked eye, so, there's no way you could see it move just by watching it, like, for a couple minutes. So, I mean, it had to be something, and they were all moving I mean, if it was, like, comet or meteorite or something, or a bunch of them, they would all be moving at different speeds probably.
Yep,
These
they do.
things kept these things look like a bunch of basically fighter planes, like, in a formation just going. Like, that's what it looked like.
Oh, that's
So,
awesome.
that's my one UFO experience, we're seeing that, and I mean, well, actually, I think I've had a couple others, but I don't they're not conclusive enough where I ever would want to actually talk about them because it just might be a waste of time, but and my wife, though, swears she's been abducted multiple times because she had a camera in her bedroom that I bought her to keep an eye on the kids when she's not in the room, and she basically, like, the one night there was like, she said before that even that she thought she's been abducted, but since she was a kid, but there was something that was like a big black hulking figure, a big shadowy looking figure, like outside her bedroom window, and her bedroom was on the second floor. So there's no way somebody's climbing up there on that side of the house. No way, unless they had a ladder, which you
Wow.
would hear and see. So there's this big shadowy black figure outside her window because it's completely dark out there. You really can't see anything. And next thing you know, as it gets closer to the window, the camera goes out and goes static.
Oh, wow.
And, and she said that night, like many other nights, she believes she never slept. Like it feels like she never slept. So
Wow.
I mean,
Awesome.
and when she was a kid, her and her sister shared a room, and, like, her sister would, like, wake up in the middle of the night, and she'd be gone. She'd look through the whole house and can't find her. And then like she'd go back to sleep, and the next morning she'd ask her like, "Where'd you go last night?" And my wife would just be like, "I didn't go anywhere." Like, so maybe a history of her getting abducted, but
Well,
I
that's
mean,
it. That's pretty wild. I
it
hate that
is.
feeling. Bugs the far out of her.
I mean, if she wasn't so shy, I would already have her on the show at some point to talk about it all, but she's too shy for that, so it never would happen. So I just have to relay the stories from what she's told me, but unfortunately, maybe I can get her to do a private recording one day and just tell her
So,
stories, but I doubt it. I doubt it. But
oh, baby.
so, what was your UFO experience, if you don't mind me asking?
I've actually had two. The latest one we had, we was in an airplane, 30,000 feet in the air, on our way back from Chicago back to Asheville. And my wife seen something. She goes, "What is that?" And right straight across from the airplane, probably, I don't know, a mile or a little over a mile, there was a long silver tube. It was keeping pace with the aircraft at 30,000 feet. It had no wings, had no tail fin, no sign of propulsion at all. And we was watching it, and she bent down to get the camera to get a picture, and this thing lit up real bright and disappeared. It was
Well, I
amazing.
mean, I believe that. I truly believe that extraterrestrials know when we are trying to capture them on film and whatnot. They're close enough. They can somehow have technology to sense it, or they sense it, and they know that's when they have to go. But
It was a trip. I mean, it just lit up and then poof, it was gone. Now, the first one I had, I was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean on the ship. I was in the Navy. And I was on an aft lookout, and I seen something off the starboard side. Or I guess it's port side. And it was just the light, and it was about 8 miles away, and I could see it. And it was just steady. It'd move and it'd go back, it'd move and it'd go back. And I got the binoculars up and I was looking at it, and you could see the lights around it and a light on top. And this thing's just moving back and forth like this, keeping pace with the ship from that far away. And next thing I know, we was on aft lookout and everything, and I let them know up at the forward lookout in the bridge, and all of a sudden this thing lit up and it shot straight up in the air. Come here, see Papa. My granddaughter's here.
ah,
Come here, baby.
yeah,
Your shirt. Come show Papa your shirt.
Sorry about that.
it's all good. My daughter likes to pop in sometimes too and be my co-host, but luckily tonight I locked the door, so it won't happen tonight. But
Shirt.
Sister, you pregnant again? Cool. My daughter-in-law just told me she's pregnant again. I might have another grandchild.
always good news.
That's fantastic. I love
Let's
it.
go see the turkey.
Yep, it is.
Love my
Congratulations.
they're awesome.
But in the see that right there is two places I always wanted to see a UFO was on a plane or on a ship because I've been on both multiple times and I've always wanted to like have an experience while I was on either, but it just I was too young to pay attention for it or it never happened. I mean, those are the two conclusions on that one. But it's I love I love
What
the
was
idea of UFOs being underwater. Like especially in California, it's reported all the time. You see UFOs just come out of the Pacific Ocean and take off. Like
yeah, over like around Catalina and everything.
yeah, it's which I mean makes you think how long have they been here that they had that set up so they can go down the ocean and actually like just park their ship somewhere or just stay down there for a while. Like they have to have that planned.
Well, I want to find out more about Dulce, and because you can't get close to the mountain itself, even if you have permission from the tribe. The government's got it all fenced off and won't let you close to it. But there's tons and tons of the locals reporting the UFOs, reporting seeing these creatures, but nobody can get close. And that's also where what was his name, lost his fingers and everything.
Oh,
Remember his name, Schroeder.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I just can't think of that name at all. It's been a while since I heard about him, but it's. I mean, the government knows. They admit they know about
Oh,
UFOs at this point, and they know more than they will ever let on. I mean, I like to bring up the story of Valiant Thor. You've heard that one?
I have, yes.
I mean, my listeners actually, I just talked about it on an episode a couple days ago. So yesterday, I think, at one of my episodes, I talked about it. So I won't bring it up. I won't go through the whole story again. But since we both know it, since we both know it, I mean, it's just to me that proves something because the daughter of the president at the time, which I always say it was Truman, but I think I'm wrong.
No, it's Truman.
Okay, I always doubt myself on that. And I'm like, no, I know that. His daughter came out later and said it was all true. Like his daughter like said in an interview that like it was all true. Like it really happened.
I
And there's
seen her
pictures.
on that UFO eyewitness with Ben. He was on there talking about it. He had actually talked to her. She come on the show and was talking about it.
Yeah, I mean it, and the fact that it's basically like the Earth stood still type of a moment, and that more people don't know about it is just how big control the government has over all this.
Oh yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. Well,
And
when
I
the
mean,
military puts out pamphlets telling you to watch out for Bigfoot, it's kind of not hard to believe that they know about Bigfoot too.
oh, I've heard multiple stories about like during a forest fire, like a Bigfoot will come out of the woods, like burnt up and injured, and an ambulance will come and pick it up actually. But then you never hear about that ambulance again. The people who are driving it disappear. Like,
Oh
and
yeah,
the government has to be involved in that. They Men in Black or whatever you want to call them, like, or what are they called now? They have another name. They have another name now, and I can't think of what it is. I heard it for the first time a couple weeks ago.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, it was on. It was on what? No, it wasn't on that. It was on. I forget what podcast it was on. It was on a different podcast I listened to, and they talked about it. But it's basically Men in Black, but
Yeah,
they dress differently now. They dress like suburban dads because it's more conspicuous now than dressing in all black suits.
seems like when I listened to Coast a while back, seems like they said something about that too, but I can't
I can't.
remember a bit what they said.
I can't think of it. Oh my god, it's gonna drive me. It's gonna drive me freaking nuts because I hate when I can't remember facts like that. But because it was a podcast telling a story about they were basically telling a story about man who a man who basically like found proof of aliens, he believed, and he got involved with the government, and this government agent was like his handler. And eventually, the guy went crazy, and they committed him to a mental asylum. And but they think the government made him crazy. That's the thing. Like that's what it is.
I can believe that. I mean, they did how many experiments with LSD and mind altering drugs just to see what they would do. That's what Stranger Things that TV show is based off of back when they did the LSD test on people.
The Montauk Project, yeah. Which actually, it's funny because I grew up close to where the Montauk Project took place in Long Island, New York, and I grew up in Kingston, New York, like 2.5 hours north. So
Oh wow!
never never been to Long Island, but it's just ah, I wish I lived there still because I would go down there now just to try to see where it was. But supposedly, if you go there now, you can't get anywhere near it. Like a black car will come up and just like be like, you have to leave. Like just
It's
guys
Area
in black car.
51 thing to me, huh?
But I can't find the name of these. But I had to try to find that podcast again because I gotta remember that. It might have been a podcast. Actually, I think it was a podcast like Unexplained Mysteries episode maybe that
Okay.
talked about it. They might have been called the Khaki Men now. I'm not sure. It was something along those lines. Like it, yeah, God. But
That's gonna drive you nuts now.
so all right. So is there any stories in your book about Mokele-Mbembe or any other living dinosaurs possibly? Because that's my second favorite cryptid.
uh, I don't know about the new book, but the one I'm releasing in November, no.
Well, I mean, Mokele-Mbembe would definitely be in the world edition if it was gonna be in that anything, but
I don't what I've got 105 different cryptids, so I don't remember if I got 15 cryptids per continent. There are 7 continents.
ooh, nice,
Yeah,
nice.
it'll take me a little bit to get all this. Plus, I've got real life encounters that were sent to me from the UK and from America that's actually gonna go in the book. And I have a reality, star it has sent me his encounter.
Ooh, interesting, interesting.
Can't tell you who, though.
I probably unless they're huge, I wouldn't know who they are anyway. I'm not a reality TV person.
Pretty big. Yeah, he's one of the Bigfoot shows. And I contact
Oh,
all of Finding Bigfoot. I contacted all the Expedition X. I contacted Expedition Bigfoot. I contact Mountain Monsters, all of them. One guy stood up and sent me his encounter.
it wasn't Bobo, was it?
I'm not going to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't expect her to, but no encounters came in of possibly, pterodactyls or pterosaurs, in
Actually,
the Southwest?
yes, I did have. I'm trying to remember where it was at. I've got a bunch of them. I've got like 18 different encounters that's going to go in the book. And it's Bigfoot, it's flying creatures, it's like a hogzilla.
Ooh,
I've got black shucks encounter. I got big tons and tons of Bigfoot encounters. Matter of fact, a group down in Florida, and I can kick myself in the hind end for not remembering the name of the group. But a bunch of them sent me encounters in, and they're just a wonderful group of people. They really are. They've been in contact with me. They've been sending me information, things that they encounter, and they've let me put in some of their actual encounters in the book.
well, Florida is skunk ape country, so I could believe it.
Well, see, I wrote about the skunk ape in this book, and the one's coming out in November. But there is one thing about the skunk ape. I think there's a skunk ape, and then I think there's a Bigfoot down there. I don't personally. I don't think they're the same, and I tell you why. I think the skunk apes are the escaped zoo animals down there because they've had chimpanzees escape zoos, and they had a bunch of illegal zoos back in the 70s. Ringling Brothers lost a train due to a hurricane down there.
Yep.
And I think the skunk apes that most people refer to are like rogue or feral orangutans or chimps that's still mating and living out in the swamp because they would make it out there with no problem. They got plenty of food. They can get away from the predators. But I think there is a Bigfoot. I've seen way too much information to say that there's not a Bigfoot down there.
Yeah, it would make sense. I mean, a lot of the stories may be escaped, um, animals from zoos and whatnot, 'cause there has been a lot of crazy carnivals and zoos down there and circuses that probably lost creatures over the years, but and I know about the train accident, I've heard about that story.
Yep.
So,
Well, I've
but
seen-
I mean, there has to be a Bigfoot down there, and
oh,
maybe
yeah.
they are seeing that, and maybe they're calling all of it skunk ape, just they're classifying it all as one creature, maybe.
That's what I'm thinking because I seen the picture it's a big famous picture. Woman took a picture of what they called the skunk ape by her porch. And it looked I actually took the picture and compared it to an aged chimpanzee or one of the giant chimps, and I swear it looked exactly like it.
Hmm. Which, I mean well, actually, it's funny because my wife, when she lived in the house on the Bridgewater Triangle, had, she still has them, but she had chickens then too, and one night she was looking out the bathroom window towards the chicken area, and she saw this creature. It looked like basically, she said it looked like a monkey without a tail, like a chimpanzee without a tail, and it was, like, standing outside the chicken coop, like, jumping up and down and, like, making noises at the chickens, like, trying to get in,
I
and
can believe
basically and I mean, it's Massachusetts, though, so there's no type of primate that's supposed to live in Massachusetts besides, like, an actual Bigfoot, but this was way smaller than any Bigfoot would be. I
Yeah.
said maybe a baby, or maybe like a youngling, but she said it looked more like a chimpanzee than what you would think a Bigfoot would look like. So I don't know. I mean, she couldn't explain it, and none of her family believed her when she told them about it. Like none of her family even believed her about it. I'm like, it was too far away to get a picture too. So, but I don't know. I mean, it's possible. It's possible. A lot
Oh
of
yeah.
crazier things have happened.
They've seen illegal zoos all over the country. So for them things, for animals to escape from there and people not saying anything, it's not that hard to believe. It really isn't.
So, I mean, yeah, and also, I mean, there's also stories in it's Peru, I believe, or Chile, of a tribe that worships basically velociraptors that live in the woods down there.
I've heard about that. I don't know a lot about it, but I've heard several little small stories about that.
I
And I
mean,
can
yeah,
believe they're still there.
me too. I can believe that. It's not hard for me to believe that in like below the equator, especially, that dinosaurs could still exist in the deepest parts of the jungles that no one goes to and that we've yet to explore. I could believe it, and
Oh yeah.
it lends credence too to the Hollow Earth theory and to like the cave system theory, because
Yep.
that's where they would stay. I mean, all the pterodactyls that people have reported seeing in the southwest of America, where do you think they're living? In the desert. Oh, they're living in caves probably. They're probably roosting in caves and hanging upside down in caves that they just go deep enough that no one goes in them because they're in the middle of the desert. People aren't going to explore caves anyway unless that's actually what they're there to do. So
Yeah. I
make
mean,
makes sense.
there's so much out there that as long as you keep yourself in the blinders, you don't want to see anything, you don't believe anything, you just want to believe what's right in front of you, then that's what you're going to believe. But when you open up your mind and you look out there and you figure, hey, there's a lot more territory out here that people aren't in.
Yep.
And right here, I mean, you figure I live not far from downtown, which this place has got a lot bigger than what it used to be. But I have woods in front of my house. I have woods behind my house. I have 26 deer, and I'm in the middle of a urban area.
Yep.
50 something turkey that come by my house.
I could believe it because I mean I live with woods behind me and in front of me kind of too, woods in front of me on the opposite side of the street. But I mean, and we've seen deer, we've seen everything. I mean, there's fisher cats around here. There's fox. We've seen fox come up and eat stuff off our front lawn.
Oh
And I
yeah.
mean, porcupines, everything. I mean, there's bears too. According to the old owner, he used to have a bird feeder in his backyard, and a big black bear would come every once in a while and knock it down to get the food.
Oh
So
yeah. We got
I
bear
mean,
too.
oh yeah, North Carolina is bear country, but there's I mean, Massachusetts, it's a little more rare, but I mean, we're 2 minutes from like the center of town, so it's kind of crazy, like to have
Yeah.
all that stuff come around.
Well, if anybody ever
Thank
doubts you about the cryptid creatures or anything, just look at them right dead in the face and ask them, have you ever seen a baby pigeon? Most
I
people
have, but
baby pigeon, even people live in the cities.
true because they nest on roofs and high up where people are not going in the cities. So
Exactly.
I, I mean, yeah, I like that. I never heard that before, but that's good logic. And and thank you, Azariana. We glad we can keep you entertained.
Oh well, we entertain
And
somebody.
yeah, yeah, as long as I'm entertaining people, I'm doing my job right. So, but are there any sea lake monster encounters in your book?
There is in the one coming out in November. Yes, I've got I've got all kinds of different sea creatures in there.
Yeah, I mean, I was supposed to have on here someone a woman who actually studies at Loch Ness like pretty much year round, and
Oh,
keep she has a boat and she's out in Loch Ness like every day trying to find, and she's actually supposedly found sonar proof of Nessie, but some of the pictures she posts online and some of the videos, I'm just like, that's proof to me. That's proof. Like I can't deny that.
it only makes sense because if you look at the layout of Loch Ness, especially if you look at the topographical and all that stuff, maps and stuff, you can see that there's caves that feed in salt water from the ocean. It's not separated by that much property, and there's
Yeah,
underwater caves and stuff. So creatures can go from the ocean into that lot because it's salt water and
that's
fresh.
I mean that's why I always heard, and that's what always been one of my arguments is that it does go to the ocean, so they can
Mhm.
go out to the ocean and reproduce out there, and then they just raise their young in the loch until they're old enough to go on their own.
Yeah.
And who's to say they couldn't be all over the world in the oceans? Because we haven't explored pretty much any of the oceans. So
No.
the stuff that could be down deep in the ocean, who knows? It could be. It's creepy to think about it almost.
Well, there's places in Loch Ness that are extremely deep that we can't even get into.
Exactly. I mean, and there's just so many different versions of Loch Ness around the world. I mean, Ogopogo, Champ,
Yep.
just to name a couple, and it's just these things wouldn't be in one place if they was just in one place. It was only Loch Ness and never reported anywhere else. I could believe people saying like, "Oh, that's not true. It's made up." But when there's so many sightings around the world for centuries and centuries of these things, like it's just impossible. I mean, the Native Americans have stories of seeing Ogopogo and of seeing
Oh,
Champ and whatnot. So
yeah.
it's just and it has to exist to some degree, and we just need to wait till someone actually gets proof of it at some point. But
Well, so there's gonna be certain things that modern science is never gonna agree exist until you lay the body on the table. And I'm afraid, unfortunately, Bigfoot, Dogman, and a lot of the cryptids, they're not gonna believe. Well, they put a chupacabra on the table in Texas, and they still wouldn't believe it.
yeah, I've heard
So,
that. I heard about that, and that I mean, what they say it was a dog with mange.
well, they never could match the DNA of the creature to anything on the record. They couldn't match it at all because the head was wrong for a coyote. It was the body shape was wrong. The ears were wrong, and they hollered it was a mangy uh, coyote, but nothing matched up at all.
Yeah, and I mean, it's and the fact that there's 2 different versions of Chupacabra reported all the time, like, one
True.
actually looks dog-like and one looks, like, completely alien. It looks like it has to be an alien.
The Puerto Rican version of it's more of a like a reptile type creature than what the ones in Mexico and Texas is.
Yeah, which I don't know what to believe then. I mean, I could believe the dog version maybe could be a creature that's a cross of, like, a coyote and something else, or is just a coyote or bear with mange maybe most of the time, and 'cause that happens, but who know I mean, the alien one in Puerto Rico, I can't you can't deny that that's anything we would know about. Like,
That's
that's
true.
gotta be
Or
something
it could
different. That's
be mutated. I mean,
true.
you just never know. I mean, there's always screwed up DNA in some, and it can change what a creature actually looks like and its behavior with the messed up DNA. So it could be a way of forming a new creature as having mutant DNA in it because of something that they ate or something that they were around or over radiated area or something like that. I mean, there's so many different reasons this could happen that to think that oh it don't exist, that's just it's not scientific and it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, which yeah, I mean, I don't know what to believe about the chupacabra. It's always been one of those it's been one of the cryptids I always said, like, if I had to pick one cryptid that I said I don't believe in, it'd be the chupacabra if I had to pick one. But
Cool.
it's it's just because it's been faked so many times, and it's been used as an excuse for so many different creatures that we know about that just kill things, so I
Yeah.
don't know. It's just that one cryptid, but what oh, that's the cryptid. I was thinking of a cryptid when I said that sentence, and I just remembered it. Um, what do you think about the idea that goatmen exist?
Now, see, Goatman's one I'm kind of iffy on. Uh, I really have a hard time. It's like goat squatch or something. I just can't wrap my head around that one.
Like the Pope-like monster?
Yeah, I have a real hard time with that. It just sounds. I mean, it's possible. Anything is possible. I just have a real hard time wrapping my head around it.
I would, but I think back to like ancient Greece and the idea of satyrs,
Yeah.
and if they had half goat men back then as well, then I mean they had every other cryptid that we know back then as well that they wrote about. So if they had satyrs, I mean, I don't know. It's just I can
Um,
picture it, and I've heard enough stories of especially of Poplick, that I'm just like, "Yeah, I have to believe it to some end. Like I have to."
yeah. I guess that's going to be one of the ones I'm going to have to see a little bit more proof on. I believe it's possible, but until I see like Bigfoot, Dogman, all those have so much evidence that they exist. You got hair, you got blood, you got scat, you got footprints, you've got everything that tells you these creatures are real, short of a body on the table. And that's why it's easier for me to believe them. But Goatman's one of those. It's mythological to me. It falls in that area. Till I see one or see more evidence, then I'll believe it fully.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of along the same lines of that because I mean, but there's just been so many sightings of these things that it's hard to completely 100% deny it in my mind. I mean, there's been more sightings of those than there have been of chupacabras, for God's sake. So it's just, I don't know. It's a talk. That's.
Bro, I see how it is.
I mean, if I had to pick two creatures, the goat man might be right there with the chupacabra in my mind for things that I question the existence of. But oh, actually, no, because there is another one that is more kind of unbelievable to me, though I've heard a lot of tales about it recently, and that's the Loveland Frogman.
Oh yeah, the Loveland Frogman. I forgot about them. Eh,
Well, on my other show, it's a paranormal discussion show with two co-hosts, Global Strangeness. We actually did an episode on the Loveland Frogman and the skateboard swamp lizard man, and I
I'm-
I mean those are two that it's a lot harder to believe in because there's been so few sightings of them.
well, see me, I feel this is just my thoughts now. I think they're more of an extraterrestrial. I think they fall into the area of the reptilians, and they've been seen. That's what makes me think when you think the frogman or the lizard man.
Yeah, that's actually a theory we talked about as well. Is that what if they're extraterrestrial? Because I mean, I always said aliens most likely are going to be insectoids, amphibious creatures, or reptilian creatures because those are the three species that can survive more than the other creatures. Mammals can't survive as harsh conditions in most, at least the ones we know about.
Well, I think we're real limited on a lot of that stuff too. I lean to the what was it I read the other day? I read something about there being 36 alien species just in the Milky Way. So it makes me wonder.
I'm gonna have to look into that at some point because that's interesting. I never heard that theory or that belief. I mean, I'd have to read into that a lot more. I mean, it makes sense. It would make sense because there's definitely so many extraterrestrial species out there just based on stories that people tell.
My granddaughter's here.
I see that. Hello there.
Say hey.
But try to let me see if I could let me see if I could stump you because this one I tend to stump everybody with unless they heard of the phenomenon. But have you heard of mirrored men?
Mirrored Man. I've heard small stories about them, but nothing to give me any real information.
Well, I mean, they mainly come from Derek Hayes' podcast, Monsters Among Us. That's where they stories of them kind of originated to, well, at least to my knowledge. That's where the stories of them originated, and he's done a bunch of he did a whole episode dedicated to stories about them basically. And it's usually three humanoid males walking in synchronization, and whatever one does, the other one does. It's almost like one of those guys at a carnival with a stick across their body with like four dummies attached to it. Like that's what it looks like almost. And people experience time loss when they see them.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've
So
heard that everything that one does is mirrored by the other two.
yeah,
That's
so I mean,
what I
I
heard.
yeah, that's basically what it is. And they're usually seen late at night in rural areas, or they're seen. I've heard one story where they're seen in the woods when someone was hiking, but other than that, like it's just that's all you hear of them, and it's almost like black-eyed children in a way. But
Yeah.
so I mean, but for the mirrored men, I always think it's more of a extraterrestrial type thing, maybe because of the mainly because of the lost time or
Yeah.
interdimensional. Those are the two theories I tend to go to.
I think I lean more towards the interdimensional.
Which
Just because, like you said, the missing time and I heard that they look almost what's the word? Somewhat translucent. I've heard that.
I haven't heard that, but that's interesting. That's very interesting.
Towards the interdimensional because of their appearance.
Right. Well, I mean, then that would be more interdimensional, I would think. But then again, they say aliens travel through dimensions. That they say aliens are interdimensional as well. So I don't know.
I guess they could be because we're so limited in what we're able to comprehend,
Yeah.
and we only see certain dimension. We only hear at a certain level, and it makes more sense that they're because I believe it. I'm one of those weird people. I believe in multiple dimensional planes and Earth because I blame Einstein because he started all this in my head.
Yeah. I mean,
Stuff. So
well, I use Einstein's example all the time because he believed in a lot of things that are now considered paranormal. Like he's one of the main people who said that like spirits exist, ghosts exist because energy cannot be destroyed. So where else would it go?
that's true.
So, and yeah, I believe that too. I mean, they have to be. I think interdimensional is the way they travel. I think it's how they travel like back and forth from their planet to Earth so fast. Because suppose if they're seeing the same spot like nightly in some places, then they have to be able to travel back and forth fast. Or
Yeah, I think that they're in like I was reading one about a who was it? Or Kit? No, I can't remember what group it was I was reading about. But they're supposed to be 1,000,000 years older than humans, so they're going to be so far technically advanced. It's scary.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, that's
we've advanced so much since 1969 compared to now. Then it should be possible. I mean, I remember when they first landed on the moon. I was 2 years old. I remember watching it on TV on a black and white little box TV.
well when they supposedly landed on the moon, but yes,
I believe they did only simply because of the stories that the astronauts brought back about other beings being there,
yeah.
and the fact that they were watched the whole time they were there, and that come from all the ones that was on the surface, all the
I've
astronauts.
I've heard those stories too, and from the look on their faces in the interviews they did afterwards, like they were scared to talk truthfully about what they saw because they were warned by the government or something. Like you can't say, like the feed cut out for a while when they were on the moon.
Oh
So
yeah,
who knows why it cut out or if the government cut it out because they saw something in the background they didn't want to talk about. So
yeah.
I don't know. It's if I can get Neil Armstrong or Buzz Aldrin on here, come on.
I don't ever trust the government anybody. I worked for them for too long, so
Yeah, but actually that's the name of one of my episodes that released a couple weeks ago. Is the government doesn't want us talking about the moon landing
I need to watch that.
because my guest that I had on when we started talking about it, like all of a sudden he got disconnected.
Oh wow.
So it was weird. And I mean, I'm pretty sure it was his crappy Wi-Fi connection, but it's still it's it's like I had to use that as the title. I had to. I knew it would get listens and I knew it'd be funny. So I was like, I have to use that as a title. But it's just I mean, we probably went to the moon that time. I can believe it. I mean, I don't believe it was a soundstage in Hollywood. That's just to me, that's too stupid to believe. Like
Yeah.
it would
That,
like
why would they spend billions of dollars to film it on TV? That just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, you had this giant
no.
rocket out there that everybody could physically see take off, and
Yeah, and I mean,
it just doesn't make sense that it would be
I
see a fake.
yeah, I was gonna say myself, I'm like, I'm sure there's records somewhere in the government of all the money they spent on that project. I'm sure the records are somewhere in the Pentagon basement or something. So it has to exist somewhere. I mean, or in the NASA record base, like there's gotta be all the money they spent trying to get that going. So
Oh yeah,
I mean, I'm sure there's records of it that prove it really happened. And I mean, yeah, like you said, people watched it take off. So
yeah.
you
And back
can't fake
then with the
you can't
technology,
fake that.
no, they couldn't fake that back then. They would have had a
No.
string in it.
Yeah.
I think
I
Plan
mean
9 in face.
I mean, that's like when people try to say like the Patterson Gimlin film is faked, and I'm like, they didn't have the technology to fake it back then, and they didn't have the technology to make Bigfoot suits back then that could move that naturally. Like
Right.
you'd be walking like a robot if that was a suit. So
Their biggest argument is Planet of the Apes. And I tell them, I said, look, if you watch Planet of the Apes, you never see any of the apes without clothes on because they couldn't get the fur right on the bodies.
yep.
And
I
I've,
mean,
I've
yeah.
talked to way too many special effects people to believe any of that.
I mean, in Planet of the Apes, I mean, they look horrible in that. Like in the original Planet of the Apes, the monkeys look horrible. Like, they look creepy. Like they gave kids nightmares.
Oh, well, see, I used to be an actor, and I acted for like 15 years, and I seen what special effects can do now and what they did back then. They couldn't do that back then.
No, they definitely couldn't. But oh, am I actually out of cryptids to talk about? Wow. I'm not. I have a list, but I just don't feel like digging it out at the moment. But actually, okay, we're gonna talk about one last cryptid, and then we'll talk about your podcast for a minute before we wrap up. But
Okay.
this is a newer cryptid that just started getting people started telling us. Well, people started talking about it a lot more in the last couple years. But what do you think about the rakes or the pale crawlers?
I think if they are real, they're evil, and I think that they're something to do with like a skinwalker type thing. Because if you look at the pictures of them, there's nothing natural about them. The color's off, the heads are wrong, the arms are almost alien like. So it makes me wonder if if it's not some kind of a cursed creature.
Interesting, because I never actually heard a theory about them based on that. I mean, I've heard people say they're evil, but they never really elaborate into like skinwalker territory. But from what I've seen, I mean, because there's that famous YouTube video out there,
Mm-hmm.
and my wife actually saw one at the house that she used to live in her backyard. She was at night one night after the kids were in bed, she was in the bathroom smoking a cigarette out the window, and she saw one walk in the backyard, and same with the YouTube video, she tried to film it and send it to me, but the screen, like, kinda blurred it all, so you really couldn't
Yeah.
tell what was going on, but it just kinda walked around the backyard, like every time I hear about them, they're walking around like someone's yard, and it's just they walk around like they're not intelligent. They walk around like they're just, like, stumbling and trying to figure out what they're doing,
Almost
and then they
zombie.
yeah, exactly, zombie-like almost, and my theory for them, and a couple other people have had this theory as well. I'm not going to take credit for it completely, but it goes back to the cave systems, because that's where their paleness comes from, because they live in darkness all day.
I can believe that. I can believe that. Yeah, that's why they only see them at night.
Exactly, and I mean, I personally think they just stumble out of their cave at, like, where they live, and they just come out at night for some reason, maybe to try to find some kind of food that they eat, or I don't know what they eat, but
Come
some
out
kind of,
to
or I mean, but it seems like they're unintelligent. It seems like they're just going on instinct. Like, they're not really intelligent enough to be evil even. Like, it seems like they're mindless creatures, like zombies basically, but even more mindless than zombies, because they don't have like they don't run after people, from what I heard, because people have seen them, and they don't like run after people. They just kind of like stagger around and then go back to where they came from.
they almost seem lethargic type.
Yeah, very lethargic from what I've heard. So I don't know. It's weird. And I do think the cave systems are involved, because there's cave systems everywhere.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah, that's for sure. I never really thought about those that much, but I think you're exactly right.
it's okay, sweetie. But so I'm not sure, but it's just. But before we wrap this up, tell us about your podcast, because I'm dying to hear about it. I meant to ask about it earlier.
Well, my podcast is basically a collage of everything. I do odd and unusual tales,
Yes,
and it has everything from weird historical facts, like did you know Napoleon was attacked by rabbits?
I have heard that.
Yes, they went into a town. He took his men in, and as entertainment and a present for his men, they gathered up 300 rabbits, and they put them in cages. And they were going to have the rabbit hunt the next day. So they get out to do the rabbit hunt. They're all out there ready to go. They open the cages, and the rabbits attacked them. I do everything from I'll have Bigfoot stories. I have UFO stories. I got stories like Robert the Doll.
Ooh, I love
It's
Robert the Doll.
one of my favorite stories of all time. Uh,
We
I
did we did an episode on him. We did an episode on Robert the Doll on Global Strange. Yes, we did an episode on Robert the Doll and other famous dolls that are
oh,
haunted.
him and Annabelle are awesome.
Oh yeah, I love the Robert the Doll stories I hear on podcasts.
At the end, it attacks you. I mean, you know, it's got everything. There's no limits on what I'm going to talk about. And the good thing is, my podcasts are short because nobody wants to hear me talk that long.
See, that's funny. That's funny right there, because people always ask me, like, "Do you ever do?" When I've been on guest on other podcasts, they'll ask me, like, "Do you do solo episodes where it's just you talking?" And I'm like, "No," because I don't want to hear me talk to myself for an hour, and I doubt anybody else would. So I'm not going to do that. I like to have guests, so I'm talking with the guests, because then it's not just my voice you have to hear. So
I'm hoping to be able to figure out how to have guests on my podcast, but I'm not quite technically smart enough yet.
oh, depending what you use, but I mean, with Zoom or StreamYard or any of the servers out there, it's pretty easy to do. You gonna wave back?
Looks like you have a
Yeah,
great co-host there.
yeah, my usual co-host.
Ain't nothing wrong with that. Enjoy it while you
No,
can.
yeah, I do enjoy it while I can, but I do want to thank you, George, for coming on. I do want to thank you for coming on, because you have been an amazing guest, and I've had more. I love when I get to talk to other podcasters who are into this about cryptids for an hour and 15 minutes. It just makes it such an interesting show, and I get to talk on the spiritual side to a lot of my guests, but I don't get to talk on the physical cryptid side to a lot of my guests, and so it's always a pleasure to get to do that 100%.
Well, I
And
enjoyed it. I loved it. Thank you.
before we wrap it up, where can they find you? Promote yourself, sell yourself as much as you like.
Well, they can find me on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, but the best place is to check out my website. It's author George Lunsford .x10host.com.
And I'll make sure to tag. I think you sent me the link already, so I'll definitely put it in the show description when I post this out.
I appreciate
If
that.
yeah, I'll actually you might not have. I think you sent me the link for your book. So actually, on that's your website. That is your website. What am I thinking? But
It's got everything on it. It's got interviews like this interview right here. I will put on my website once I get the link to it.
much appreciated.
Well, I
And
like
as
to
all
help
my
out everybody as much as possible. I mean, everybody helps out everybody. We're all good.
well, exactly. I mean, it's podcast. I always say podcasters are a big family, and they need to help each other out because there's enough space out there for all of us. There really is.
You're a
So
great host. I mean, you're really good and you're fun to talk to, and you got a good
I,
co-host. So you know.
yep. Now you're in trouble. You're in so much. But as all my listeners know, you can find me on Paranormal New Normal / Maniacal Music Musings podcasts with a S Facebook group. You can find me on Twitter and the Gram as at Juggalo Bastard. And you can find us on TikTok as Juggalo Bastard Podcasts. Or you can find all my videos on YouTube. Just search Paranormal New Normal and you'll find the channel. And I will be back with another interview, I believe, tomorrow night. I have a busy week this week, if I'm not mistaken.
Sounds
Actually,
like
nope.
it.
I'll be back with 2 interviews on Saturday. That's what it is. Tomorrow I have my other show. So I will be back on Saturday to all my watchers and to all my listeners. I will catch you in half a week. Thank you for joining us, and I will thank my guest George one more time because it's been a blast. Have a
I
good day, folks.